coming. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Today we are very thrilled to have Dr. Aimee Mark to show us how she teaches her online classes. And as you know, Aimee Mark is the award winner of our Lee Cooper Core Curriculum Award this year. And I am very looking forward to hear what she has to show us. So let's give her a round of applause.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, setting the bar high, but that's okay. Yes, well, thank you for inviting me to speak. My talk really is geared towards folks that are perhaps kind of starting out in the world of online teaching. So I know that there are several of you that have already taught online. Hopefully there'll be bits, nuggets that you can kind of walk away with that might be of use to you or helpful to you. But so today I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the perspective that I have on teaching my social psychology class online. Okay, so admittedly, I'm kind of an accidental online instructor that I do really enjoy. I mean, the reason why I came into this area and wanted to be a faculty member is really to teach, and that online face-to-face interaction is, really the momentum and the passion that I have for teaching, that you can really have that direct contact and to see people develop those questions, to work with them more closely on content. And so, initially I didn't necessarily think that I would be interested in teaching online, but I came to see the light. Knowing that we had lots of great resources and technology available to us, I became more interested, potentially because I was interested in a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. So not, admittedly, not having maternity leave available to me made it a little bit challenging to manage my first child, my little boy Jaden, and so that made me realize, there might be other options to teach my course load and to explore options like online teaching, and that you don't have to have a baby to want to teach online, but certainly for faculty members that are wanting more time dedicated to perhaps research or service or other avenues, it certainly can be really helpful to create that flexibility, and it's been a really great experience in that sense, to be able to delegate your time in different ways, and of course. Also, having the course be more accessible to students is really important with our strategic plan and wanting to be a 24/7 kind of campus. It is important for students to be able to get those classes for their major completed in a timely fashion, and to have those online sections do create that greater variability that our students really demand, especially if you consider that they are also a lot of times non-traditional students, or students that are working many hours, as we know. Online really helps to give them that greater access. Also, I've taught my class social psychology. I've been teaching it for 9 years, and while I love teaching social psychology, I am a social psychologist by training, and I love teaching it in person. I had been teaching it for several years, over and over and over, and that this also gave me an opportunity to really kind of revisit and re-energize my class, that I found really exciting, to try to incorporate different technology, or try to incorporate different activities that a standard 1 hour, 15-minute, or 50-minute increment didn't allow. And so I thought that was really neat, to be able to, wow, now I'm not confined by this small time frame, and we're worried about an activity being broken up into odd kind of a time. And so I've incorporated and been able to expand on what we do actually in class. And while there are trade-offs of not being able to interact directly with them face-to-face, the trade-off is I get to do different kind of activities and have them engage in different different assignments and things. Okay, well, I mean, as most of us know, when you are creating a class, really the syllabus is your first line of defense. You know, that you want to, of course, with any class, be very clear about any information, any requirements and things. But for an online course in particular, I recognized that really, right, you have to be very, very clear about what types of materials they need as far as, one, the information, so standard textbook, any kind of additional readings and things, where to get them, but also the technology element. And that's, I've had some surprising emails of folks that say, you know, I don't have a computer. You know, well, you know, it's in the syllabus that you should have a dedicated computer that has high-speed internet, that has Office or platforms to allow you to access the information. And so, you know, the syllabus, right, is your first line of defense to say up front, this is what was expected of you, and these are the requirements just of the course kind of going in. And so that's always really nice to refer students back to. And I mentioned that the kind of exciting component of teaching online is that I could incorporate different activities into my class. One activity that I thought was really great, but didn't know how it would fit comfortably in my regular time frame of teaching was having my students view a documentary. There's a documentary called Misrepresentation, and in our section in Stereotyping and Prejudice, they learn about, of course, right, where these stereotypes come from, the implications for these stereotypes in our society, and the potential for discrimination. And a lot of times, you know, students think, oh, you know, that's kind of in the past. Like, we know that, you know, the civil rights movement has occurred, and the women's movement has occurred. We all have these rights, but they kind of forget that there are still issues that we need to be aware of and cognizant of. And so being able to have them watch, say, a documentary and really reflect on that, I think has been really great. I've gotten emails back after they viewed it or in reading their papers saying, you know, I never realized, right, how, and the video features how media tends to sexualize women and focus on the objectification of women in the media. And for them to actually see those images and to see all the different examples of how media depicts women in these ways is really, I think, helpful. And then it allowed me to have them reflect on it in longer assignments. So with a, you know, because you're able to present your lectures, or at least I do present my lectures using Panopto video lectures, that time that you're not in class in person giving those lectures, you're able to process and read more, you know, longer papers, longer assignments, to let them kind of go more in depth, apply what they learned in the lectures and the textbook to specifically the lecture, the video, the documentary that was presented. So regarding the media, right, to outline right up front part of the requirement book and your ability to access this documentary. Sometimes in the early times I had taught this class, sometimes students would say, well, I was mad that I had to get access to this documentary. I mean they had it available, you had it available on Course Reserve at the library, but I don't think that it's fair that I had to you know, buy this or purchase this. But it was clearly stated in the syllabus as this is just a part of this course, and that I think it's really great to, as Megan kind of told me, introduce multiple ways to access that. So, right, I did use the library Course Reserve, which is great for students that are on campus. They could bring your phones and watch the documentary in-house. But, you know, lucky for us, there's so many great online sites like Amazon, Netflix, that they can rent, or iTunes even, they can rent and view the documentary for $2.99. I mean, we've purchased it. I know the liberal arts has purchased this documentary for $250+ for a copy, but for students, they can view it, rent it for $2.99, and that certainly, I think, is a worthy investment for that kind of learning experience. And so, right, to make clear up front that like textbooks, the media that you're going to be providing is part of this course. And that's really important to tell them how many different ways that they can access it. Certainly, contact information is always going to be very clear in your syllabus for your course, but one thing that I do too for students that obviously are in remote areas and might not be in the vicinity of USI, I do hold Skype office hours, so virtual office hours, in order to interact or talk with students if they want to. However, most do opt for the email, as that seems to be a little bit easier for students. But having that option, I think, is great for them and their comfort level. Yes.
I'm just curious, have you ever had anybody do the Skype office hour?
I have had one talk to me via Skype. Yeah, so it's really rare that they do. But I think that it's comforting that they know, right, if I'm in a location that I can't get to USI, but I know when I read that syllabus, oh, you know, there's that office hour that is online that I have access to. I could talk to that person if I wanted to.
Yeah, see, I just asked because I've got that too, and
Nobody
ever. They call me on the phone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have had one. So very infrequent, yes.
I do have to say that any technology is technology, no matter it's Skype or telephone, as long as it works, you know, as long as students feel they can reach out to you, I think it's a great method.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right, and yeah, it's a great comfort, I think, for them to know that there's multiple ways they can contact you. Email does tend to be the predominant one. And obviously in your syllabus, you're going to have really clear information about your assignments and things, but for an online class, it's going to be very important. I still am kind of working with how to really make some of these issues clear regarding things like assignments. So specifying, I do in my syllabus outline and describe actual assignments, and I think I will need to develop greater clarity on what is expected, what is the kind of format. I think I need to even get more specific. I've given very clear instructions on what is required for some written assignments, but I still see students just kind of writing whatever they want, and I continue to write feedback saying, read the syllabus and assignment description. You are not doing it. It requires you to do X, Y, and Z, and those are not in this paper. Yes.
I just want to share with you something that I only found out this semester, and that's that my students don't know how to access the feedback.
They don't?
No. And when I told them that they had to go and look at the feedback, I had a whole slew of emails saying, how do I find it?
Oh.
And it never occurred to me that I had to tell them how to access the feedback. So here I've been doing like you, writing all of this.
Right.
Yeah. And they were never reading it because they had no idea where to find it.
Where do they access it then? I mean, how do they view that then if they're not, it's not apparent when they open up?
Well, they don't open up their grades. They don't realize that if you click on the grade, that it's going to take you to all this other information. So that's
goodness.
Something I've added to the syllabus.
Great.
How to find your grades, or how to find feedback.
Right. And I have had a few students write in Blackboard email me saying, how do I view my grades? Like, they don't even know sometimes how to view your grade. And I, in the Blackboard help site, I'll, type in the search view and grades and send them the link for it. So yeah, there's a lot of technical information sometimes that some students, you think it would be obvious to know how to access things like grades, but that's great to know that doesn't just kind of pop up when they, click on their grades. Oh, that's really helpful. For the syllabus, like your other classes, you likely have some sort of schedule. It's imperative to have that for the online class to really outline those due dates for assignments, exams, and to really clarify for example, me, I state in several areas, and still sometimes get questions, that when it is due, when there is a due date, it is due at the end of the day on that day, 11:59. So that's the end of the day of that day. And so to clarify really those things, because they wonder like, well, when, and what if it's, and hopefully they understand time and understand that at 11:59, that's the end of the day, PM.
It's the end of the day.
Eastern Daylight Time, Central
Oh,
Daylight
geez, I have not specified. That is true. Oh, goodness. That should be more clear in my syllabus. Should we have, I guess if you're in Indiana, it's a problem.
Too, sure.
That's an excellent point. My goodness. So also in that syllabus to have the grade information, right, what's the breakdown? I've really thought it's headed off a lot of problems by indicating the range. So this point value to this point value equals this grade, period. That, right, there's no ambiguity. There's no, oh, I've got, 95.8. Does that mean I get whatever grade? Or, that it's very clear. I do have had, like many, have had students that say, oh, I've done really badly on the paper or the exam. Can I redo that, or can I revise it for some points? And again, you have to point to the syllabus and say, this is what your grade's based on, and to be uniform in how you apply those, I think is helpful to avoid perhaps crosstalk. Should you make one exception, that's a problem, and that to kind of be equal, you want to certainly grade everybody on the same with the same rubric. Also, as was suggested, certainly putting in that element of technical support. So obviously there could be issues with Blackboard, or issues with their internet, or being able to connect to Blackboard, and things that are beyond my scope. And so including that in the syllabus is, I think, really great, because that's their reference to know who to call, where to go to about Blackboard, about computer issues, because obviously that's not my forte, that's not my training. Regarding my Blackboard site, I do, and as a kind of new person to online teaching, I've tried to streamline my Blackboard site as much as possible, because certainly when you're not in person with them and you're relying solely on Blackboard, you do need to make that really user-friendly. So I do customize the tabs on the left for my course, and you'll see that in just a little bit. I do pare it down and eliminate any unnecessary tabs or unnecessary information. So you'll see just a kind of small screen capture of my page. I really just only have that announcements block on my main page, but the tabs are what are really important. In the tab about this course, I include things like the syllabus, and I'll talk about the different welcome and introductory kinds of lectures I provide that would be located in this course. And I've broken down my content into different modules, or that's where the course lectures are located, as you see. Different readings I've indicated are separate tabs. I have a separate tab for where they can access that media, that documentary, and I have another tab specifically for exams and assignments, for them to go to that tab for submitting things or completing those exams. Okay, so when I start the semester and I have my Blackboard site up and running, I do email them to let them know we're ready to go. You can access this information. And then I do in that email direct them to where they should begin, what should they do to start, because obviously, if you're an online student and maybe this is your first class, you might not really know, well, what am I to do, or what's going on. So I instruct them to, first go to Blackboard and see the syllabus located in the About Course tab on Blackboard. In that tab, I say there are two different lectures. The first one I would recommend after reading that syllabus is to go to view my lecture, my welcome and syllabus overview lecture. So in my case, I use Panopto. I record an audio of me, just describing a little bit about myself and my background, and my familiarity with teaching this area and all that. I give a brief welcome to the class, and then I walk them through really the syllabus, knowing that of course they should have read the syllabus. I do highlight a lot of those elements that I talked about, those technology requirements, media requirements, and course policies, and so on in that lecture. And then I do tell them after that lecture I'd recommend viewing a little Blackboard tutorial, just to encourage them to walk through it with me, to look at the tabs and to know, if I need the syllabus, well, where is that? It's in the About Course tab. If you need to access the course lectures, they're in the module tab. So just to really make sure that they understand where everything's located, what everything is, I really think that's very helpful. And then lastly, I'll say once those are completed, I'd recommend that you start at the beginning and go to the first lecture, go to the modules tab and access the first topic, Introduction to Social Psychology, and click on the Panopto link. So hopefully, and I've had good success with kind of presenting that information and not had too many questions coming at me after the first couple days of the class being active. Now, while the class is in progress, I do recommend that, obviously, because this is an online class, that you will have to maintain a certain amount of accessibility to email. That's really their way of getting back to you, and so it's going to be expected that you are able to get back to people quickly using email. And I think maybe the biggest maybe tip would be, especially if you're administering those online exams, that I do within my course, provide the online exams and leave them available until a certain date in time. And I've noticed that just for technology problems, students even claim that while they're hardwired in, even at the library, they claim that they are trying to do the exam and it says this timed out, or it cut them off, and so they have to access the exam again, but you have to manually go in there and reset it for them to get back in. And so it's imperative, especially on those important days like an exam, to check multiple times, to be able to respond to students, and try not to let it get too far out beyond the date that you kind of specify it should have been completed. Regarding online exams, so in my case, I chose to administer my exams online. I do recommend that you randomize the test question order. So when you're setting up your exam, it does give you that option of whether or not you would present the items of your test in random order. And I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that if two students were trying to cheat and were in the same class, if they weren't randomized, question one would be question one for one student, and then they could sit next to each other and say, hey, what did you get for number one? And then kind of walk through the exam together. At least I would think the randomization of those test items would help to deter that to some extent. But yeah, that's another item too that is an option is you can allow them to see the feedback of the exam. What's the wrong answer? What did you provide? And I do recommend that you would set them, if you wanted them to have feedback, to set that after the date that it is complete. Otherwise, one person could take the exam and kind of then know immediately after how they did and say, hey, for that item, this is the answer. Or potentially take pictures of them on their phones. Technology is certainly helpful, but sometimes tricky. Regarding grading too, like I mentioned, I do provide in my course several written assignments, so that allows me to, while I'm not directly interacting with them, that does allow me to hear more about their reflections and their application of the content, and that I do provide, but they may or may not be seeing them, but I do provide and recommend that you provide that feedback to them so that they kind of recognize what it is that they're doing right or wrong, and be able to correct that. In my course, I actually have 4 very similar activities where they review 2 different perspectives from psychologists on a debate issue. So maybe an issue might be, does subliminal persuasion exist, or is that real? And then have them read 2 different perspectives and reflect on that, and identify strengths and weaknesses of those arguments, and then to discuss and reflect on those. And so if I didn't give the feedback, I would continue to get assignments that were maybe not meeting those standards that I had suggested. So feedback, I found, does help a student improve and understand where they need to be to do well in the class. And then also, like I said, to be consistent. So I tend to, when some students say, oh, I'm really messed up the paper on this and that, and can I rewrite it for some points, I do say, I'm sorry, that's just not fair, and that I can't allow you to be able to revise or redo elements of your class, and I have to be fair to everybody. So I think being consistent is really helpful. So if those of you are maybe thinking about online teaching or are new to online teaching like I am, I guess there's some points that I would emphasize. One, obviously, we have really great resources here at USI that can walk you through, help you with the technology. It can be certainly intimidating, right? I wouldn't say that I'm a kind of tech person, so it was a little bit intimidating, but we have wonderful resources, obviously, like Megan and Laura. Lance Wood's really helpful when working with him on Panopto. So it's the program, if you're not familiar with it, the program that you could use to record some of your lectures. He's been really great. If you're just even thinking about transitioning or adapting a course that you're teaching into online and into an online format, I would recommend that you think about recording those lectures if they're in progress now in a face-to-face situation. That's really can help you minimize extra time that you have to maybe re-record them if you're teaching that class now, or know that you are teaching it now but want to prepare it a little bit later for an online format. And my last kind of tip would be that you should start with the basics. That it is really, there are a lot of different technology options as far as Panopto versus VoiceThread versus GoToMeeting, and different ways that you can certainly interact with your students and set up your course. But for those that are kind of new, I do encourage that you kind of start with the basics and build on from there at your comfort level, and that rather than not do it at all or be intimidated by the whole process and just wash your hands of trying an online class, to start small and do really basic things and set up your class, and from there learn about how things are working, what things aren't working, and add on rather than just be so intimidated by the process. So once you gain experience, comfort, and you grow as an online instructor, you can add on those bells and whistles and add on different assignments or different activities. Okay. So any questions about my experience teaching online?
What experience do you have with discussion board? And the reason I ask is I see some value in it as far as in just engaging the students, but I have yet to really discover a lot of learning, increased from doing it. So
right.
I'm sure I have a lot to learn in that way.
Right. Yeah, I haven't used discussion boards. I've struggled with how to incorporate or translate my in-person activities in an online format. And so I had worked with Laura and Megan on an activity. So in my class, face-to-face class, they actually read those two debates perspectives, and in class they are meant to get in small groups and actually debate each other. Yes. And so in my initial attempts at teaching this class, I was intimidated really by that process and trying to equate an online version of that, because it would require group formation and preparation and then the dialogue that would have to be monitored and facilitated. And so while Megan and I did talk about a feasible way to work that, my initial attempts, I kind of pared it down, and I had them just simply read the materials, reflect on and write on those materials, and provide additional kind of connections with the course content rather than have them actually interact. But that would be my next kind of step. My next add-on for my class would be to try to incorporate that element. And the difficulty I had too was just the amount of time that would take within the class. So if I'm covering, say, attitudes and persuasion, talking about subliminal persuasion, and I have the activity of them getting into groups and then also interacting online with that, requires time, and then also the activity of them then connecting and interacting with another group who's on the opposite side takes time.
Sure.
And reflection. So I was very concerned about that. And so, right, that's another thing that I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to incorporate that would not be, that would be a smooth transition, but that also wouldn't be really unwieldy for the student, because I was also concerned that students might get really frustrated with this constant kind of deadlines and waiting on people to provide, let's say, comments, and then they'd have to reflect on those comments and respond. And so, right, I am still kind of struggling with those issues. Yeah. Sir, yes, another question.
On that point, I've used discussion boards and Blackboard in both undergraduate and graduate, and I think on net they're very useful, but it is time consuming in terms of reading, because it needs to have some grade attached to it. And secondly, the major downside, I think, is actually the parroting, that you don't get value added. Once a few people respond. So I've not done this, but one way of dealing with that might be because in a physical classroom, we don't call on every student, or we don't ask every student to respond. So you might break the students up and rotate, and the discussion board could still be viewable by all. So it could be a class discussion board, but you wouldn't necessarily expect everyone to post and reply. Every time. So that way you're engaging students. And I think particularly at the graduate level, the primary value, or a key value of the discussion board, is the creation of class community. That is, it's not just bilateral conversation, but multilateral, because you're involving more and more students. So I think they get and again, I found particularly in my graduate course, the discussion boards are very, very useful for that. I would actually have on the exam some students reference posts that other students had made in discussion in their answers. So that was evidence to me that it was working. And
did you grade their responses on the discussion board
just
for content, or
in a simple qualitative way, whether they met or exceeded or failed to meet expectations in terms of the basic things that I wanted them to do? Cheerleading comments were nice, but they didn't meet expectations. It had to be something substantive. I agree with Jane. That's not
right. Yes.
I'd like to add to that, because what I've done to so that you don't have the repetition is I've done in my LIBA class and in also some of my history classes, the students can be naturally divided up so that they have a specific interest. So for example, in the book history class, which is my LIBA class, they're all reading the same text, but I've got people from radio and TV and psychology and history and English and early childhood education. What they have to do is twice a week, the class is set up so as if it met twice a week. Twice a week they have to post on the discussion board about something that they heard in the lecture or read in the text that caught their attention, and link it to their major. They all have to link it to their major. And then they also have the opportunity, they don't have to, but they have the opportunity for 2 bonus points if they respond substantially, in a substantive way, to somebody else. And it's amazing how many of these students want to talk to each other and comment on each other. And I don't get the same thing because they're all coming from different disciplines. Now in my history classes, the students very early in the semester are going to decide on what their research paper is going to be. So they have different approaches there. I do the same sort of thing. They do the discussion board, but they explain how what they learned in that lecture or a reading assignment relates to the research that they're doing. And it can be methodology. Oh, I learned that, people who take an approach as a gender historian will look for these kinds of details. Or it can be factual. This helps me because it explains something about states' rights in the Civil War, which I would never teach because I'm not an American. But so I've started to use the discussion boards more in the type of way that Dane is actually saying, in order to create an online community,
Mm.
but it's also a way of getting them, or at least trying to get them to stay current on the readings and the lectures.
That's a great tip.
And I also want to share the power of synchronized communication. We're teaching the Gens 199 course, Surviving and Thriving in Distance Learning. We just had a really successful session last night, meeting students live online. And not only the excitement of seeing each other's faces and be able to, chat informally before, it was a great session that we were able to go over the syllabus and the Blackboard navigation that we usually communicate by text. And students, they don't really read carefully, so a lot of the time, they miss some important information. And that another benefit of that live session is that we were able to remind them what they need to do in this week and what they missed last week. It's a by-turn class, so we have half week last week, and we wanted to do assessment. And many people just did not realize there's something need to be done right away. So through that session, it was a really nice way to remind them that we chat like a friend informally, so they don't feel threatened. They feel very connected with us. And we only do that twice a semester. We don't do that aggressively. And students who cannot make it the time, it's perfectly fine. We record the session, they watch it, and they do have a makeup assignment. We want to make sure they watch it. So we ask questions that they had to answer. They can't answer if they don't watch the video. So that's another way, I think, to engage discussion, especially for the graduate level, that live interaction. And these days, I think technology is mature enough to
Megan,
deliver
what
that.
technology are you using for this?
In that class, because it's the way to teach them how to be a better online learner, so we use two different systems each time when we meet them. Yesterday, what we use is GoToMeeting, which we're using right now for this session. Just so you know, we broadcast the session to anybody who cannot come here. We have a lot of nursing faculty who are not in the Evansville area, and they do join the online session. And so GoToMeeting is a quick way to make that happen. And then there's another system called Blackboard Collaborate. It has more feature than GoToMeeting. However, at the same time, you just have to pick up the right tool for you. Depends on what kind of activity you want to engage in your online session to decide. Both tools are pretty stable and easy to use. So, and then in our office can support that. Oh, yeah, Chuck has a lot of experience with Blackboard Collaborate. You want to talk about your session with your graduate student?
With the Collaborate, it is live, and they can choose, and I can also choose if I wanted to use the face-to-face, and they can use microphone, or they have the chat part. So there are challenges watching the chat questions, but you can draw on that, you can have media up and stuff, so it's sort of like a live classroom, what it amounts to.
Yeah, this is a cute feature. They can raise your hand, and there's a number assigned, so you know who raised first.
Right.
So that's kind of fun.
Now you hear a ding or you see the you can set it up for all this stuff like they would in a classroom. Now I was thinking when you said debate, you could do it there. Blog works well for debating. That has to be set up so there's directions for it. But I've used blog before in Blackboard, and that works quite well because all it is the comments. It's not like discussion board. The comments can follow one right after another.
Oh, so it's just
like a text on phone.
Oh.
Messages on phone. People go back and forth. As fast as these folks can text back and forth. And you can do that with blog a lot easier than you can with the discussion board because you have to link, hit stuff like that.
I also heard a great example that Leanne shared with me about using Facebook as a synchronized discussion. You want to share with the group about your experience?
Well, I'm taking an online class right now, totally outside of the university environment. And the instructor had us do a Facebook, a Facebook seminar. And again, students from all over the country. And she led that. And so we participated in a quick 10-minute reading thing, and then she had a series of questions that we all responded to. It was short. It was maybe not an hour, 45 minutes or so. But you know, Facebook's easy to use, and so everybody's connected in a group. You create a group very easily, and
it was
worked out well.
synchronized by the syntax offline. It's still text, old-fashioned way, but we all use Facebook. You know how exciting to see that comment going back and forth, and they create that synergy in a classroom, which I think maybe that would be a nice way to do debate. Just get everybody online on Facebook at the same time. So.
On your online testing, I was going to say on online testing, I found done online testing through Blackboard many times. There's a couple things. This I learned through two things I learned from Walter is that you have to close out that My USI screen behind it, or it will time out.
Oh.
Okay. Second is if they don't hit a submit button in Blackboard, it does not know it's being interacted with. I mean, if you have a short answer question, they can type all they want. Blackboard doesn't know. They have to hit submit. So, but also, this is from my experience, unless you hit forced
forced
entry,
choice. Oh.
if you have that button, you will have to reset it. If you don't have that button checked, they can go in as long as they haven't submitted the whole test.
Oh.
They can roll right back in. I've had people have to get on a different computer and go right back to where the test was. Because I timed my test, so as long as the time hasn't run out, they can pick up where it's left off. As long as they haven't hit submit the whole test.
Okay, but then they can go back, you know, they can go to different questions as throughout. So, potentially if they had a buddy sitting next to them, they could kind of roll back and forth.
I learned from somebody in IT design a long time ago that no matter how much we want to, they're going to, so why worry about it?
Right.
Timing and randomizing the question that's you're going to do.
Right.
But that's just to let you know, he did tell us
a little trick,
My USI is timing in behind because they're going through My USI. Whereas they go through, you know, once they log into Blackboard, get rid of that screen.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
But they have to, you know, minimize the Blackboard
window
interface and then get rid of that My USI.
Close. Okay. Oh, that's a good tip.
That come out of Walter and his crew over there.
Yeah. It's tough to manage when they're I've get every test there's always a handful of people that say I'm even hardwired in and I don't know what happened, it timed out or you know kicked me off and now I can't complete the test.
I've had very few and I did this elsewhere. I never monitored the test. I'm nursing faculty over there. You got to monitor your test for what? I can't. So, you know, I occasionally have one that when I look through, they honestly, but very seldom.
I got some feedback lately from faculty community, not just one person, but multiple people saying that this version of Blackboard tends to have more exam problems. Do you
right. You're right. The new Blackboard maybe platform.
It has a lot of improvement area for Blackboard. Like two features I really. It's my least favorite feature on Blackboard. One is the exam, one is the discussion board. Well, the gradebook is a problem too. It's too complicated. But I heard that exam feature. Have you experienced anything this month? Like, do you feel it's worse than before?
The main thing for me that I think is a step backwards is the log function. Now I'm teaching a basic English 101 composition, so the course is pretty much blog based, especially in terms of pre-writing. But the way you set up now, in the past, you could do, a link to everyone in the course's individual blogs, and they would click on the name and go right to the blog. This new version, there's like this extra step that when you click on the student's link, you still see yourself, and it says 0 blogs, and you have to hit the down arrow to see the student's content, and it makes no sense. But one thing with the blogs that I think has been helpful for my courses in terms of community building is that I cropped their photos from the class roster we can get on online. And if you ask students, hey, send me a photo, they're not going to do it. But when you crop their ID photo, then they want to change that, and then they'll send you one, just to put a face with the name. I think that even it's caused students to be more curious about other people's work and to take a little bit more, pride in their own work, just because they're no longer anonymous, I guess.
How do you get how do you get access to their ID photos, and then you cut and paste? Yeah. Are you just cutting and pasting then and saving
the magazine? I've got Photoshop and just, it takes a little bit of time, but not too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you get one on your expanded roster.
Right, and so I wasn't sure, was he just cutting and pasting and saving that, individual files?
Right, I would crop each individual
Wow.
student and say those different files.
And then
Do you
upload it.
Photoshop your own picture too?
Lowercase.
I've learned a lot of secrets to good teaching from Kardashians.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to ask you, what's been your experience, whether you've been able to tell in your social science course, about the characteristics of the students? That is to say, are these students truly benefiting from distance learning? Or is it more space shift, where you have students that certainly could take you face-to-face on campus, but for whatever reason have opted for the online?
That's tough. Because I don't necessarily. I do see them on campus, or they interact with me. They come see me later, or they say, I had you in this class and I want to talk to you about this or that. So I'm not quite sure how many of them are far away and not either taking it as a class that they want to bring into. They're not full-time USI students per se. I don't really know what kind of student they are. I do know that there are ones that they're working, they are USI students full time, but they just kind of fit it in, and so not quite sure how many of them are off in some other state and some other city.
Even if they're in Jasper or Tell City, it's a wonderful. I'm not quite sure about whether they're in Newburgh, if it's a great value, but particularly since the price of gas is going down.
Sure.
But we do have construction again on the Lloyd, so you've got that.
Sure.
I do want to add something to that. I just want everybody to know, in Arizona and California, their university, I think it's Arizona State, they start to offer distance learning course for their residential students. Complete program. They are pure online students. They don't take any classes campus, but they live on campus. Wow. And the idea is to accommodate, this generation's learning preference. At the same time, they also found there's a great benefit of expense costs cut down, because if things are delivered online, there may be some physical expense can be saved for the campus. So for those campus, they do see a win-win situation. They do find that students engage better if the interactive activities are designed and embedded in the class that fulfill their learning desires. And so that is actually happening in our country right now. So it's worth to think about. It's no longer, a lot of the higher education educators no longer see distance learning as an alternative option. They see that as their main pedagogical delivery option. So. Any other question for Dr. Mark?
You have a very cute little guy there.
Thank you. I couldn't resist.
I'm glad though that in this picture he's not wearing
the UK.
That awful.
That green and white stuff. What is that?
Oh.
Such a symbol.
I was tempted to put that up there as well. I didn't again. Well, thank you very much for letting me share some of my ideas and perspectives on teaching online.
And thank you for everybody to come. We certainly had a great discussion today, and I really enjoy this kind of event. So if you can fill out your evaluation to help us to better improve our events, that would be really wonderful.
Sorry, Tamara had to leave because I wanted to compliment her on her VoiceThread presentation once upon a time and share with the group. I did for the first time student group presentations at a distance class using VoiceThread this summer. and it was quite successful. So the only lesson learned that I have is it was an end-of-term project, and I'd introduce an earlier one the next time I teach this, so that they have a little more practice in terms of doing the group voice thread. But it was, most of them had no experience whatsoever with voice thread. They were able to do it. I didn't dictate to them that it had to involve a webcam, so they could do webcam or audio or even text. But they were able to coordinate and do their presentation and put it up in voice thread, so it worked quite well.
I'm glad to hear that. If you're interested to watch Dr. Hunt's presentation on VoiceThread, it's available on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and search Learn USI, one word, and you're going to see our channel, you click on it, you can see all the presentation from the This Is How I Teach seminars, and there's some other faculty training videos we put in there as well. So, well, thank you very much for coming. And we will have another session in 2 weeks. This semester we don't do it weekly; we do it bi-weekly. So keep in tune. We'll send out another announcement as the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you.